Welcome into another episode of Her Playbook. Her Playbook is a podcast from the Giants Podcast Network in which we highlight stories of inspiring and motivating women around the world of sport. My name is Madelyn Burke. I'm your host, and joining me this episode is someone I am thrilled to have on. She is an author, she is a motivational speaker, she is a fitness coach and a Peloton instructor, Emma Lovewell. Thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
It's such a treat. And first of all, I've got your book here, Live, Learn, Lovewell. What an accomplishment to write a book, first of all. That is something, that's probably one of the hardest things I can even conceptualize doing, starting, finishing, what have you. What made this the right time for you to write a book just recently?
Yeah, it is such a big deal. It's a lot of work, and so now I know. And because going into it, I didn't exactly know how much time and work and thought goes into it and heart that goes into it. So yeah, I'm very proud of it. And I think I had always wanted to write a book since I was a kid. I just didn't really know when the right time would come. And so a publisher reached out to me and who took my classes all the time and said, I love what you say in your class, but I want you to expand on it. Like, you tell these 30-second stories in between your intervals, and I want to hear more from you. Like, would you ever consider writing a book now? And I thought, well, that scares the crap out of me, so I should probably think about it. And so here we are, 2 years of writing the book, and now it's out.
That's incredible. And I mean, throughout the process too, I think anyone who's tried to write anything has experienced writer's block. I love how you talked about how you got some advice from your dad that you actually put in the book about telling a story and what have you. But this process must have been so eye-opening. I'm curious what you learned about yourself in writing this.
Yeah, I included a lot about my parents in the story. And so I loved sharing like a little recipe from my mom, some writing tips from my dad. And they're just such a part of my life, and I want to acknowledge them for all of it. And I think that I've learned a lot about myself in that I had some really hard conversations with my parents as well through this writing process, because I'm going back and talking about my parents' divorce, my mom's cancer diagnosis, all these things. And we've talked about them, but it was a long time ago. And so then re-bringing up these things and traumas and events that have happened in our life, and talking about them now where we are, and we are very different where we are now than where we used to be. And so kind of rehashing through these conversations was very therapeutic. And it was definitely a great opportunity for me to connect with my parents in a more meaningful and different way.
I can imagine. And just kind of like you mentioned too, just getting some of those 30-second stories or anecdotes and pieces of advice and wisdom that you've learned throughout your life, committed to paper. A lot of those, of course, can be heard in your Peloton classes. You are a Peloton instructor. I love the story about how you got your start, right? You essentially emailed the CEO of Peloton from a nudge and advice from your partner there. I think it's one of those things, as a woman especially, so often we think, oh, I can't do that. But like, men are like, why not, right? And so the moment to have that courage to say, like, let's just dive in and email the CEO. Talk about what that must have been like to just send that email and get that response so quickly.
You're spot on. It's like, as women, I think, and there's a lot of talk about this. It's not like we're the first people to have this conversation,
right.
But there's the stereotype that like women won't apply to jobs unless they're overqualified, where men will apply to jobs if they're underqualified. And I think we have something to learn. I think that, women supporting women, men supporting women, my partner being like, go email the CEO. He's like, what are you going to lose? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Wayne Gretzky quote right there for you. But it's like, it's so true. It's like, if I don't put myself out there, what's going to happen? Nothing. You put yourself out there, the worst that's going to happen is you don't hear anything, or you get a no, and then you know. And the more you know, the better you are. So I really, I had met the team at Peloton early on. I was in a Kickstarter campaign for them as a model and actress. And so that's how I had the first introduction to the company, and I got to meet the CEO. So it wasn't a completely blind email. I had met him before,
right.
But I hadn't spoken to him in many, many years. And I was feeling really stuck in my career. I was teaching fitness out in California at a different tech company, and I was not fulfilled. I was confused. I wasn't making a lot of money. And I was just like, what's next? Like, I want to reach more people. I want to, like expand my craft and my skill. And so my partner was like, Peloton's killing it right now. Why don't you just email the CEO? I was like, what? I don't just email the CEO, and, but I took his advice. I wrote the email, slammed my computer shut, like took a lap around the apartment, all nervous,
Yeah.
and the CEO wrote back in 20 minutes and he's like, let's get on the phone. Like, let me get you a call with our head instructor and get you an audition. And I will say that it's not like everything just fell into place right from there. Like
Right.
there were still moments of, he's like, I'll get you on the phone with so and so never emailed me. And so then I was like, had to push back again and be like, hey, remember me? I never heard from that person. So I will say that it's not just putting yourself out there once. You got to kind of do it many times.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And you got to have that kind of courage and belief in yourself that, yes, I can show up to this place and I can ask it. Like closed mouths don't get fed type of a mentality. But we all know that energy, right? You send an email, you send a text, you send your phone across the room and you just run around and like, no, I can't face this right now. But it's that adrenaline and facing those moments and being bold that kind of gets you into areas of growth in your life as well. Now that you are, on this roster of Peloton instructors and you talk about your relationships with some of the other Cody Rigsby and Allie Love and some of the other instructors that we're all familiar with, one of the questions that I always want to know when I take a spin class is how do you curate a playlist and how do you keep every class is a different mix of music and you have such an eclectic music taste as well. How do you decide, okay, this is what the vibe is going to be. This is this type of music I'm going to share today. What goes into that process?
I love it. It is such a skill to have. It's like being a professional DJ. And there was a time in my life I DJ'd for like a good 6 months of my career in New York City. So I have a little bit of DJing experience. But think about how a DJ can totally create energy in a room. Like you can create a vibe, you can do whatever, And so when I think about the vibe and the energy and the environment that I want to create in my classes, I think about that first. And then I think about what music fits that vibe. So if I'm teaching a rock ride, do I want it to be really challenging? Lots of climbs, like really aggressive, or do I want to teach, or am I teaching like a pop ride and I want it to be lighter and fun? And so I kind of just think about, like when I teach a HIIT class, high intensity interval training, like I want it to be intense. I want it to be a little angry. And so I tend to pick my like Rage Against the Machine, Metallica kind of vibes. And then, yeah, when I'm teaching like a low impact, I like indie rock, I like indie music. And I just think about what I'm asking you to do. If I'm asking you to push really hard, I'm going to give you music that's going to inspire you to push really hard. If I'm asking you to chill out and relax a little bit, I'm going to play more chill music.
I think as people, just general population people who take fitness classes, who try to work out, there's always these days where like, not today, I'm not motivated, I can't get on that bike today, but you do it every day, day in and day out. And I think people have this misconception of like, oh, well, as a fitness coach, as a Peloton instructor, you must not face that hurdle. It must be so easy for you. But let us behind the curtain. You absolutely do, right?
Oh yeah, no, there are definitely days I don't want to work out. Like, are you kidding? Half of the days I don't want to work out, but there are things that I do that, really I remember who I'm working out. Okay, so it's two things: my workout for work and then my personal workout that's just for me, because they're two separate things. Yes, for my job, I think of the thousands of people that tune in to take my classes every day, and I want to show up for them. I want to celebrate their milestones. I want to be there. I know that people are going through hard times. I know that fitness and these classes and my words can really help people get through difficult times and get through a hard day. And so I want to be there for people. And so then when I think about my own personal workout, I also think about myself and how I feel and what I need physically and mentally. And a lot of fitness, and I'm glad people, I think, are now accepting and acknowledging that fitness is for our mental health as well. I always say we are much nicer people after we've exercised. I really believe that we need to get our energy out. If you're impatient with people, your kids, your spouse, whatever, if you get some of your energy moving and you get some of your energy out, that you can be more calm.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I think about what I need for myself, my mental and physical well-being, and for the people around me. I'm a nicer person after I've exercised for myself.
And I mean, to quote the critically acclaimed Legally Blonde, exercise gives you endorphins, and endorphins make you happy, and happy people just don't cheat their husbands, right?
Oh my God, I love that quote. I need to steal that quote and start using it in all my press interviews.
exactly. Yeah, got to shout out to Legally Blonde right there. But it is interesting too. I mean, curating these playlists, building this, and I know that a lot of this goes into too, your background comes into play a lot. Your dad, you mentioned, was a musician, and you've got a lot of your eclectic music taste growing up. But also in this book, you talk a lot about growing up in Martha's Vineyard, in a largely white community, in a mixed race family. You've got a lot of Asian heritage, and I love the story about having your friend come over for dinner one night, and you were so nervous about the food, and she accidentally ate one of the hot peppers.
She ate a hot pepper.
Yeah, it was so precious because it's so relatable, right? But especially as young people, so many young people go through this urge to fit in and to blend in. And at what point or what moment did you say, like, I am embracing myself for standing out?
Yeah. I mean, it's constantly a journey, because even as an adult, I think we want to fit in. And so it's constantly putting ourselves in these different environments where we like size ourselves up, and then we're always like confronted with ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so I think that like it's constant, and it started at an early age where I was like, okay, I'm trying to fit in, but I can't. Like the lunch I'm bringing to school is very different than all my friends' lunches. When I invite my friends over for dinner, we're eating very different food than when I go to my friends' houses. And so at first it was like kind of being embarrassed about that. And then realizing after I've traveled a lot, actually, once I turned 18, I started traveling. When I was in college, I was traveling. And I just think travel is so important for people because it allows you to really understand other cultures and witness other cultures. It makes you a more tolerant person. Mm. And it made me really appreciate how much my mom has gone through. The fact that she immigrated to a foreign country without speaking the language, without, a big community, without knowing a lot of people. She created a home. And even after my parents divorced, my mom stayed there and created a home for my brother and I. And I just look at her so differently now than when I was a kid. But I say that this journey is ongoing because I'm constantly like, even at Peloton, being half Asian and then all of a sudden but not looking Asian. Mm-hmm. It's confusing for some people. People don't understand what I am, who I am. But then I started teaching Lunar New Year classes. I started speaking out against violence against Asian Americans. And the feedback I'm getting from the Peloton members has been incredible. Just so many people being like, thank you for speaking up. Thank you for being a face. Thank you for being a role model for my kid, for me. So it's still a journey, but it's really incredible to see the community sort of come together and support me, even though I am still figuring out where I belong and who I am.
And I think that is such a relatable element, though, because I think we all on some level have a journey to self-love and self-acceptance and what have you. And one of the things that I love that you prioritize about it is your date nights with yourself. And that is just I think that's so sweet. Tell me about that and why that is so important to you.
Yeah, I think, living in New York City for so many years, it's not super uncommon to go out to dinner by yourself. I mean, maybe for some people it's a little uncomfortable or uncommon, but I really recommend it because you don't need a date to go out to a nice restaurant. Treat yourself to a nice restaurant, to a nice dinner. And so I started really doing it more like on a weekly basis with Peloton, because my schedule, I was teaching a Friday night class, and instead of sitting in traffic after class, I was like, why don't I just take myself out to dinner after class? And so then I created a list of restaurants that I really wanted to try in the city, and I would just go sit at the bar. And, I write about it in my book because I know some people might identify with this or relate to this or want to try it. And you feel a little uncomfortable at first. You're just staring at your phone. You're like, how many times can I read the menu? Do I stare at the wall? Like, are people watching me? And nobody's watching you. And it's like just such a nice experience to connect with yourself and to maybe put away your phone and just really enjoy what you're doing and be present, enjoy the flavors and the textures and the smells and the environment. And I just think the relationship we have with ourselves is the most important relationship that we have. So if you can take that time to self-care and take yourself out on a date, I think it's really important.
Absolutely. And it's something important to foster. And one of the many pieces of advice that you give throughout your wellness coaching, throughout your Peloton instruction, all that. One of the other stories that I loved from this book was you talked about when you were sailing as a kid growing up. And that is so relatable. And it's like a perfect analogy, but it was so precious the way you described it. And sometimes, you know, you can't, what is it? The conditions aren't working for you, but you got to make the conditions work for you. I may have butchered that a little bit, but you know, okay. Talk to me about how you kind of use that analogy in your day-to-day life, and how some people listening might be able to say, okay, that makes sense, because things aren't always going as planned. It's not always smooth sailing for everybody, quite literally. And how do you kind of pivot that perception and your mindset to help things move along?
Yeah, I think that, you know, my book really demonstrates that my growth was not linear. A lot of people's growth is not linear. It's not every single job was better than the last job. It's same with fitness. Not every single workout is going to be better than your last workout, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, right? It's like the collective experience that brings us up. And so I think that, like, knowing that, you know, we need to be malleable. We need to be able to acclimate to new situations. Things aren't always going to just like be easy, right? And actually the growth mindset, all of that happens in the difficult times. So you don't grow when things are easy. So it's, you know, it's hard in those moments that are difficult and challenging, because you don't want to be there, but try to find the silver lining in that. Like, this is a learning experience. This is, I'm going to come out of this stronger than before. And yeah, I just think, you know, sailing, I'm so lucky that I grew up being able to sail. And, you know, my dad had this old boat that we would go out sailing on. And so he taught me a lot. And, you know, there's just something about like being out on the water and having the wind, there's no motor, like just the wind pushing you, and like just trying to problem solve. You're just like constantly trying to problem solve. Like, okay, the tide's doing this, the current's doing this, the wind's doing this. Like, how can I just make this work for me in the best way? And I think that, yes, it just relates to so many life experiences of like, how can I make this work? Because it's so easy to get discouraged and get down on yourself. And sometimes it is just a mindset of like, when you focus on what you have, you start to feel like you have a lot, instead of when you focus on what you don't have, then you feel like you're lacking.
Absolutely. It's like that gratitude or that mindset shift that changes everything. And, you know, you've already accomplished so much. And I know that from, you know, varying perspectives, but I'm just in awe of you. And I look at this and I think, like, you have gone through so much, you've accomplished so much, and you have so much wisdom to give. But I'm curious, if you look back at a younger Emma, what advice would you give yourself, if any?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people might say this too. It's just like, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to work out. Like, don't worry so much. But I'm a worrier. And I don't think, like, I worried all through my adolescence and 20s. And I still worry now. But I think it's just like, so even if I told my younger self not to worry, my younger self would have still worried. Like, I know myself, and she would have been like, okay, girl, I'm still going to worry. But I guess it's like, yes, you know, it's fight or flight. It's like you take these, you learn from, when you have questions and when you have doubts, like, that's information, and that's sort of helping to guide you. So it's like, it's okay to worry, and just know that, like, that is part of the process. So like, wherever you are, you're not stuck there. The only thing that's guaranteed is change. So if you're in a moment of feeling stuck, it's like, just bear with it and know that, like, that's giving you information to help you make the next choice that you're in. So, I mean, I would just tell young Emma, like, enjoy the ride. It's gonna be, you're gonna have ups, you're gonna have downs, but just enjoy it.
You'll have hills, you'll have intervals, you'll have all of it, but you know what? Enjoy the ride. Emma Lovewell, author, wellness coach, Peloton instructor. Thank you so much for taking the time with us today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
That's a wrap for this episode of Her Playbook. My name is Madelyn Burke. Thanks so much for tuning in.